Well, the rising tensions in the Middle East are said to have resulted in many airlines deciding not to venture anywhere near airspaces deemed dangerous or potentially so, with decisions to reroute travel now the norm. But how disruptive are conflicts to the aviation industry's ability to move passengers and cargo around the world in an efficient, cost-effective manner? Well, to share his observations on this issue, I'm joined by Linden Birns. He's an aviation specialist and the managing director of Plane Talking. Linden, thank you very much for joining us. So even before Iran upped the ante against Israel by launching those ballistic missiles into Israel earlier this week, the aviation industry had already been disrupted because of the Gaza war. How has this been playing out since October last year?
Hi, good afternoon. So what has actually happened is, flights in and out of places like Tel Aviv, which is a busy hub, and also Beirut. Obviously, they've been heavily disrupted over the last few days and on and off over the past year, frankly. And really, although those two cities and the airports there are serving Israel and Lebanon primarily, you've also got a very busy piece of airspace with a lot of flights that traverse from the Gulf region, from places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, across to Europe, as well as flights going from Europe across to India to Southeast Asia. Typically, they route through that airspace. So you've had a lot of flights having to circumnavigate, to divert around that airspace, adding extra flight time. That's obviously pushing up the cost for the airlines because it means more fuel that they have to consume. And also it means that they've got to try and rejig and re-coordinate with each other on their connections if people have got connecting flights and connecting luggage. So there are a lot of issues around that. What I think is the most worrying was that up until Tuesday, all of the various protagonists would make a public warning, publishing notices to airmen saying, look, avoid this area between the following times because there's likely to be military activity. And what happened on Tuesday was there was no warning, and we had civilian aircraft, passenger airliners flying through that airspace, and we've seen video footage taken by passengers and by pilots showing the missiles being launched out of Iran, and aircraft having to turn away unexpectedly. And we've seen a number of warnings now coming out from aviation safety authorities around the world saying, really avoid that area because there is a high risk and danger of miscalculation. And they're very specific about the danger of those ballistic missiles and military drones from Hezbollah being launched and being misdirected at civilian aircraft that might stray into that airspace. So that's a real worry.
Yeah,
but I think
I was going to say
the next biggest.
Yeah, continue.
Go ahead. I was going to say the next crucial issue, though, is going to be the oil price, and you touched on that in your previous segment before you came to me. That's obviously a worry. We've seen the oil price starting to go up again. This is it will have the biggest effect worldwide on air travel because the cost of jet fuel accounts for about 30% of the price of air tickets or of air travel today. And even here in South Africa, we pay a massive premium for our jet fuel because most of it's imported. And so we've got additional logistics costs. Now, if the jet fuel price, which is typically about $20 higher than the crude oil price, starts to go up, that's going to make things very tough again. And that's going to have a ripple effect throughout the economy because then we'll start seeing other items in the consumer basket going up as well.
Yeah, Linden, that was actually one of my concerns that I wanted to raise with you. You've articulately responded to that. So for airlines like Emirates and Qatar Airways, which respectively boast Dubai and Doha as their major airports, which literally serve to connect the world, how complex will these flight restrictions get for them in doing what they do best?
I think it affects, well, obviously, the Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, but also Istanbul, which is just up the road. And this really does mean that airlines are having to try and find alternative routings, try and skirt around Iranian airspace, skirt around Israel, just as they have been doing over the last couple of years with Ukraine as well, and Russia. So it's not an insurmountable issue. It's just an inconvenience, and obviously it becomes an expense as well. But it's quite manageable, and the airlines are managing to do that. Just out of interest, Beirut Airport is operating. There are a number of flights in and out there today. We've been tracking some of those, including some evacuation flights. Tel Aviv Airport as well, also operating, but both airports with a significantly reduced amount of traffic. A lot of airlines have suspended operations to those countries, so they are typically flights coming from Israeli airlines or Lebanese airlines that are operating at the moment.
Is it true that a lot of Israelis have left the country?
That I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I'm afraid.
because
Sorry,
that's
I don't have
that's
that sort of
fine, because that's
information.
one of the things that has come up, is that with all this war that's been going on, even prior to the shenanigans with Lebanon, a lot of people have left the country because they're concerned about what the end game is going to be. But the last thing the last thing that I wanted to ask you though, Linden, is ultimately what impact does this have on airfares? Are we going to be paying more going forward? If this is short-lived, is it business as usual? Or if it's long-lived and we do see a regional war, are we going to be paying more for our flights because of what happens with jet fuel and everything else, and the rerouting of flights and the longer voyage, longer trips and so on? What does that mean for the consumer?
Well, hopefully, the cooler heads and common sense and peace will prevail, and it will be a short-lived situation, and we can get back to normal. But no, I think in the long run, if this is going to be a prolonged period of instability and military activity, then yes, I think we should expect and anticipate prices to, the cost of air travel to go up, because it's not just the fuel that I spoke about before, but also you'll have, pardon me, additional costs for security, because people will be worried about asymmetric threats to air travel and other targets. There'll be the additional cost for manpower, because if flights are longer, you have to have more crew because of safety and making sure that you don't have pilots and cabin crew who are operating when they're fatigued. So all of those things come into play, and at the end of the day, there's a cash bottom line for that. So yes, it could certainly have those wider ramifications.
All right, Linden, thank you so much for your time and insights. That was Linden Birns. Linden Birns, he's the Managing Director of Plane Talking.